The bat signal has been lit. Go through the grandfather clock, secret entrance, and head back to the Batcave. It's time to revisit the Batman animated series with your hosts, Adam and Nick. In this episode, Chris fills in for Nick.
Welcome to another episode of Back to the Batcave. As always, I'm your host, Adam. And with me this time is my co-host, Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Doing great, Adam. Happy to be joining you yet again here on the podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing fantastically. It's always fun to get together with you, and even more so when we're talking about Batman, which is the topic of conversation today. Specifically, we're going to do something that we've talked about doing, often, off air, and that is revisiting Batman 66, which was a formative Batman content for both of us in different ways. But we'll get to those specifics in a bit. But as always, when there is news pertaining to whatever we're talking about, we cover it and give you our opinion. Not necessarily Batman 66 related news, but it is Batman. You'll remember that, and it's another formative Batman for both of us. You remember that I think it was last year, or was it 2021? I can't. The years are just all jumbled together, the last few of them, so who the hell knows? But last year or 2 years ago, we got the Batman '89 comic book, which was essentially, the sequel, the Tim Burton sequel to Batman Returns, and that book discounted Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. It just treated them as if they didn't exist. We of course reviewed it on our network, and I think at the time both of us were really hoping that it would produce a follow-up, and luckily we now have that news that yes, indeed, we are going to get another series set in the world of Tim Burton's Batman. The same creative team of writer Sam Hamm, who of course wrote the Batman '89 script, and I think did a treatment for Batman Returns before being replaced by another writer, and artist Joe Quinones. So the creative team's returning. This is called Batman Echoes, and it sort of takes place, The gist of the description is that crime is sort of on the rise. Batman is missing, and his citizens have taken it upon themselves to sort of, protect Gotham. And of course, as you might imagine, that goes awry, and everybody's wondering where Batman is. That's pretty much all we know in terms of the plot. There is a cover image by Joe Quinones that features Batman I believe it's in the background, it's sort of in the middle. There's Arkham Asylum. There's Red Skies Abound, and we also see this universe's version of the Scarecrow, and who I believe the woman in the picture to be Harley Quinn. That image, that one cover image, Chris, is leading to a lot of speculation that this book is going to take some cues from the discarded Batman Triumphant script. Remember the movie that was supposed to be the fifth Batman movie, starring George Clooney and Chris O'Donnell, and it was supposed to bring back, supposed to have Nicolas Cage, I think, as the Scarecrow. And I think Madonna or Courtney Love, take your pick of what the rumor was back in the day, as Harley Quinn. And there was that one scene that was going to bring back all the Burton Schumacher villains as like a fear toxin hallucination. So a lot of fans are speculating because of the cover image that they're going to use elements of that discarded script. If they did that, obviously they'd have to change certain things to, exclude, the likes of Riddler and Mr. Freeze and Two-Face and Poison. Well, not Two-Face, but Riddler, Mr. Freeze, and Poison Ivy, because we haven't seen those villains in this Burton universe. So they'd have to finagle that. But so my two questions for you are: what are your thoughts on the return of the Batman '89 continuity to comics, and then the potential, idea that they may be borrowing from, or the possibility that they could borrow from the plot of Batman Triumphant?
Well, as a fan of the original Burton films and of the Batman '89 series that we got, as you pointed out, either last year or the year before it, because I can't remember either. But yeah, man, the more the merrier. I really liked what Sam Hamm and Joe Quinones did with that series. I'm happy to see that the same team is returning, because that's not always the case. The premise sounds interesting. A Gotham on fire, sort of, without Batman and the citizens taking it upon themselves to step into the role that he filled. Yeah, man, sign me up. I think that sounds like a really, really fun and interesting premise. The merrier with this series, as far as I'm concerned. And as far as using ideas taken from Batman Triumphant, I mean, at this point, there are so many different treatments and scripts and around that never got made. But if they have some good ideas in them, then why not borrow from that? At some point, somebody thought it was good enough to go into some sort of production. So I mean, you don't have to. I'm not saying let's recreate the entire film that we didn't get in comic form. But yeah, if there's good stuff in there, let's go for it.
Yeah, I think my thing is, I would take out, as much as fans would have wanted to see that on film, I would take out, or I would rework the part about the fear-induced sort of haunting of the past villains. I would still use the Joker and the Billy D. Williams, Harvey Dent, and the Penguin, but I wouldn't use Mr. Freeze or Poison Ivy yet. What I would do is I would hope to save those for a sequel to this, because I would like to see the Burton Schumacher iterations of, not Schumacher, but the Burton iterations of what Mr. Freeze and Riddler could have been like. But I want a full-fledged story with them, and not just, hey, look, we're a hallucination. You know what I mean? I want full-fledged stories with them. So that's the only thing that I would kind of tweak if they were going to use elements of that script. But yeah, I mean, I love this world. Everybody knows who listens to this show that I love the Tim Burton and Michael Keaton Batman. So, this comic can go on to infinity as far as I'm concerned, and I keep buying it. I think I said when that book came out that if DC announced that these books were ongoing, again, these are another 6-issue miniseries, but if DC announced that the Batman '89 and the Superman '78 book all of a sudden transitioned to ongoing series, I would legitimately drop every other book and just get those two, and I'd be content, and I'd be okay with that. I'd survive, but they're not doing that, so I don't have to make that call. But if I had to, I would be content. But so I'm all for, like you said, the more of this world we can get, the better. And it's, it's a nice thing to have, given the fact that it appears that we are not going to get any more of Michael Keaton as Batman beyond what we saw of him in The Flash. So this is a nice way to keep that Batman going. And you never know. It keeps the hope eternal that, hey, they do those animated movies. Imagine putting the original Batman 89 and then eventually book and then eventually this one as animated films that Michael Keaton could do the voice for.
Sure.
From his home in his pajamas where it wouldn't be as intensive for him. That's a possibility. So who knows? But right now we're getting the comic. And I think you and I are both excited for it.
Wait till November, which is kind of a bummer.
Right, but the way time is going lately, it'll be here before we know it, and so we'll of course review it as it's coming out and share our thoughts on this very show. So stay tuned for that as that approaches. But that pretty much does it for the news. There's not much this week, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a break now, and then after the break, we're going to come back and start revisiting Batman 66, the classic TV series starring Adam West and Burt Ward. We're going to talk a little bit about our fandoms for that series, and then we're going to review the first 2 episodes of that classic series. So stay tuned. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back with some Batman 66. Stay tuned.
What's up, everyone? It's the Emerald Enthusiast. For all of your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows, which include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Power Rangers, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast. You can check us out on Podbean, and remember to subscribe right here on YouTube. That's the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. From the first podcast to the last.
And we're back. And as promised, we're going in our time machine back to a much simpler time. And we are going to discuss Batman, the series from 1966, as I mentioned before the break, starring Adam West as Bruce Wayne Batman and Burt Ward as Dick Grayson Robin. Chris, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the 2 episodes that we're going to talk about, let's give the viewers and listeners a little bit of background on our fandom and experience with this series. So take it away. What started it all with this series for you?
Well, for me, Batman 66 is my original concept of what Batman was, both the series and the movie. I had the movie on a VHS that I watched over and over and over. And then I remember my grandfather had cable, and one of his cable channels would play the Batman 66 series reruns. And this was in like the early to mid 80s. So when I was at his house on weekends, I would always watch the old episodes of Batman 66. And so I fell in love with all the characters. And just the crazy colors and how vibrant everything in the series was, and the over the top villains, and Cesar Romero painting over his mustache. I really, this has a warm place in my heart because it preceded Batman 89. I was 8 when that movie came out, so I was exposed to the series and the 66 movie far before that.
Yeah. I'm in a similar boat. I remember one of some of the earliest sort of memories I have. I had to have been 4 and 5 years old, in that age range. It was a year before. I know it was a year before 89, or 2 years before 89, where there were reruns of the Batman 66. Every day in the afternoon, around I think 4:30. And I remember it was a ritual where you come home from school, right? You have a snack, and oftentimes it was chocolate chip cookies and milk, and Batman was on TV, and I'd watch it, and again, it was just, for me, like you said, the costumes, the colors, the uh, the gadgets that he had, the Batmobile, the Bat computer, the everything Bat, associated, and it just, the amazing thing is when I was a kid, there was no, I didn't understand the winking at the camera or the playing it a certain way for adults. To me, it was dead serious. And when there was that, peril, in the first half of the two episodes, when there was the peril at the end of that first one, and they had to wait till the next day to find out what the hell was going to happen, there was legitimate concern that, oh my God, are Batman and Robin going to make it out? So I took it very seriously. Well, it wasn't a joke when I was 4 and 5 years old. But it was just, and talk about, like, it just embraced what it was, which was a comic book show. Whereas, when comic book shows began to become commonplace, oh, we're not going to let the character wear the costume because we don't want to go there. Like, this had costume. I mean, it's, you look at the way Batman, Robin, the Riddler, the Joker, the way they all look, it's as comic accurate to the comics of the time as you could get. So when we talk about, comic accuracy today, about, looking at Peacemaker or Blue Beetle's armor, or Batman from BVS, the way he looks like the Frank Miller version, for back then, that was as comic book accurate as you can get. And the other thing for me was, all I noticed, and I didn't realize at the time, again, you don't really reconcile as a kid that it's an actor playing Batman. When you look at it, it's just, there's Batman. But as you go, and as I got older, and especially now, having the actor playing Batman, seeing my first name across the screen, that's pretty damn cool, right? So all those things just hooked me, and obviously '89 then took it to another level. But without Batman '66, igniting a spark, I don't know if we're sitting here having this conversation. Well, we're not sitting here having a conversation about Batman '66, obviously, but in general, I don't know if we're sitting down having this conversation. So it was very formative in my understanding of who and what Batman was, and all of those things. So it was very influential. And I never, there was a period of time where a lot of fans kind of shunned it and pushed it to the side. I never did that. I always appreciated it for what it was. Even now, like, years before it made a resurgence, like when it came out on DVD, like, I had always thought, okay, I mean, it was for its time. That was the tone and that they chose to employ, and it was what they wanted. So I appreciated it for what it was, and I think Batman fans as a whole should appreciate it for the simple fact that when it was released, before it was released, the Batman comic book title, sales weren't going great, and it was on the verge of cancellation. The popularity of the show led to a re-ignition of popularity in the comics. So, it saved the comic from, almost cancellation. So there's that aspect of it too, that I think, it should be appreciated for. And that was the first instance of, Batmania, as we like to call it, was back then. And then we'd see it again in '89, and then again on that scale in probably 2008 with The Dark Knight. But that was the first instance of it. So it was very It's very influential, and it should be respected. Whether even for some people that don't care for the tone and tenor of it, I think they should have some reverence and respect for it for the simple fact of what it did for the character in terms of uh, elevating his stature in pop culture. Um, so that's my initial thoughts on that. But let's get into the episodes. First up, Chris, give us a little bit of background.
Well, this, as you mentioned, it's a two-part episode. When this originally aired, it would air on consecutive nights.
Yeah.
So you'll see at the end of the episode, it says tune in tomorrow, not tune in next week. But this was executive produced by William Dozier. He is the one who's credited with bringing it to network television, and starring, of course, Adam West as Batman / Bruce Wayne and Burt Ward as Dick Grayson / Robin. We have in this specific episode, we have Frank Gorshin making his debut as the Riddler. But other series regulars were Neil Hamilton as Commissioner Gordon, Stafford Rep as Chief O'Hara, Alan Napier as Alfred, and Madge Blake as Aunt Harriet.
Indeed, and I will say that I really love Alan Napier's Alfred. Just off the, like, it's funny because in the first episode, in the first two, you really get a sense of him being the traditional, butler type, but then as we go along, we see he gets involved in the Batmaning of it all, and we've seen that carry through, through the course of the adaptations. So, but he wasn't just. I know probably a lot of people when they think back think, oh, he was the most just the butler of the Alfreds, but really, if you look at the series and go back and watch, he was much more than that.
Yeah, even to the point of in the movie, he wears a mask and pilots the Batmobile with Robin beside him as they try to follow Bruce Wayne and Miss Kitkat.
Yeah. So,
you're right. They don't really lay much of that groundwork here. In this one, he is in these two premiere episodes. He is, as you established, Bruce Wayne's butler, but we also see that he is the one person in their private life, their personal life, who is aware of their secret.
Yeah.
Even Aunt Harriet doesn't know that Bruce and Dick are Batman and Robin. Every time they're out fighting,
that's good.
They tell her that they're on a fishing trip.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of excuse, as to where they're going, why they're going there, why they're out, with the whole 9 yards. Some interesting things of note for this episode, this first one especially, was here I think is one of the only few times, maybe the movie as well, where we get somewhat of a summation of Bruce Wayne's origin. We learned that his parents were shot, were killed, right? And he mentions he's trained for all this, his whole life. So we get the Coles notes, the sanitized for kids as much as we can version of the origin of Batman. But that's really, do we need? In hindsight, all these many years later as adults, I don't need more than that. Really, for the purposes of this show.
No, in the first establishing shot of Bruce Wayne in Wayne Manor, he does mention that his parents were murdered when he was a young child. So we get that information immediately. And for comic book readers such as us and people who have grown up with this, with the Batman, different iterations of Batman throughout the course of our lives, you got to understand a lot of the people watching this series in 1966 premiering on network television in prime time, they haven't read Batman before. They don't have 4 different Batman iterations on film that they can reference to know the backstory, you had to give it to them. But you're right, it's sanitized in that we don't really hear the details of it, and it's certainly not shown on screen. It's just referenced by Bruce Wayne. And then, as you mentioned later in the episode, Batman mentions how he's been training for fighting crime basically since the night his parents were murdered.
Yeah. I liked the way it was done for the purposes of, like, for the nature of what the show was. It did just enough, the other thing that I really liked was that they just thrust you into the world of Batman exists, and the police are terrible at their job, so we need to call him to do it for us. And they even allude to that. We can never figure it out ourselves.
Yeah, our initiation into the world of Batman is brought through the prism of the Gotham City Police Department. We see that they have received a clue from Riddler, and they mention that Riddler has stumped them dozens of times. And Commissioner Gordon goes around the room and like calls out specific people and is like, "Hey man, are you ready? Are you up for this? You think you can tackle the Riddler? Can you handle this?" And every one of them like hang their heads. Nobody wants to step up and be the one who answers the call. So we see our first glance of the red bat phone that leads directly to Wayne Manor. So they have to call in Batman to do their job for them because they can't do it.
Yeah, and it's cool because obviously now they're the iconography, all the iconic things that we're used to for the show. But think about it from the perspective of back then. You're seeing the red phone for the first time, the bat poles for the first time, the sliding down, getting into the car, going around the bend, right, with the sign. This is 6 miles, or Gotham City, whatever it was, 6 miles.
14 miles.
Yeah, 14. Thank you, 14 miles.
In episode 2, there's a sign that says 6 miles.
It's the other place. That's right. Yeah. Sorry, that's why I was getting confused.
Yep.
No, but you get all the iconic the things that we think of as staples of the series. Here, imagine getting them for the first time. And I love the 89 Batmobile, but I also love me that 66 Batmobile.
Oh yeah.
It just, I mean.
And while you're mentioning things that you see for the first time, this is our first glimpse of the walking up the wall gag. No celebrity faces poke out of the windows to see the Caped Crusaders in this episode. That probably came later when the show was like super popular and everybody wanted to be on it, and they were like, "Well, you can't play a villain, but we can have you open this window and say a funny crack about Batman and Robin real quick." But we get that, and then we also get the very colorful bam, pow, zap word bubbles that appear on the screen during fight scenes.
Yeah.
So that was new at the time, and you've seen other media even copy that. It was such a big phenomenon.
But when you think about it in hindsight, all they're doing is replicating the sounds you hear when characters hit and punch each other in the comics, or not the sounds you hear, because if you're hearing a comic, see a doctor. But the sounds that are written when characters punch and kick each other in the comics, they're just being put on screen, and that is such an invent. Like, who would think that, the fact that they had that thought process to actually it's in the comic, let's put it on the screen. Like, who would ever think of that?
And it's very colorful and vibrant and
yeah. And when
the music goes along with it, like the music that is being played in the scene, the horns will sound really loud when one of those shots lands and you see the word bubbles. So it's all tied together very well in the editing and in like the sound production. They do a great job with it.
Agreed. Yeah. And two interesting things is the Riddler is shown to be very very cunning, very intelligent, and very much able to um, succeed, at least initially, in in fooling and stopping Batman and Robin in their tracks. Like that whole setup to lure them out, only to have them look like they're assaulting him, and so that he could hit them with a lawsuit. I thought that was ingenious. Uh, and
Yeah, our introduction to Riddler isn't even him committing a crime. It's him setting things up to look like he's committing a crime. But then when he is falsely apprehended by Batman and Robin, his whole plan is to file a $1 million lawsuit against them, which is so quaint to think about. In 1966, $1 million was a great sum. Of certainly, in today's standards, it would probably be like $1 billion that he was seeking. But yeah, that's kind of the Riddler's plan here, at least in the beginning of the episode, is to make Batman and Robin look foolish and to take them to court.
And we also get but what I liked about it, leading up to that, Batman and Robin were shown to be very intelligent in being able to decipher the riddles.
Yes.
I like how they gave both Batman and Robin, ample time to shine as the solver of the riddle, right? So it wasn't just Robin or it wasn't just Batman. They equally, it was a partnership, and they really kind of showed that. The other distinction that I think is important to make is Batman says it when he goes to arrest the Riddler, right? As a deputized officer of the law. So he is, in this iteration, the idea of him being a vigilante is not entirely accurate, because he is sanctioned by the GCPD to do what he's doing.
Yes, this isn't the Christopher Nolan world where the police officers are trying to apprehend Batman and bring him in and unmask him and find out who he is. They are fully on board with Batman and Robin acting in the manner of, as you put it, fully deputized agents of the law. Mm-hmm. So they have all of that legal power behind it. And the police are also on board with wanting to protect their identity. You see in the Batman 66 movie when Miss Kitka says something about Batman removing his mask, and Commissioner Gordon is like, "Great heavens, great Scott. We would never think of asking Batman to do that. That would reveal his true identity, and then he wouldn't be able to fight crime." So you're right. It's a different Batman than it's a different relationship between Batman and the Gotham City Police Department than what we see in later iterations.
Yeah, and even though it's quite different, just him like being, in the same room in broad, with the other cops, with Commissioner Gordon, it just reminded me of that scene in the Batman when he walks into the crime scene with Commissioner Gordon. And because I remember I became, going back to when I watched the Batman, I became the Leonardo DiCaprio meme when he sits up and he points at the screen. That was when that scene came in, and when he's walking into the crime scene with Commissioner Gordon right by his side, that was Matt Reeves kind of giving a nod to Batman 66, albeit it's different because he's still a vigilante and the only one that wants him there is Gordon. It's still, brought back memories of 66. So when I saw it here, I'm like, aha, there, I did it again. It was double. It was like the point within a point. It's like Inception for that meme. But that is just a cool thing. We also get the origin or we see, which has become a classic meme now, the Batusi. For the first time, we see that, and you gotta love Batman at the nightclub. His drink of choice is a glass of orange juice,
freshly squeezed orange.
And he still gets screwed over because it still ends up being spiked, so he can't win.
But he's breaking it down pretty good with Molly out on that dance floor.
Yeah, I mean,
like you said, everyone has seen the meme of the Batusi, and we were introduced to it in the very first episode, and it became iconic.
Yeah. And of course, Robin is waiting in the car, in the Batmobile, because he's not of legal age to enter.
Right, he's underage. He can't go into the club.
And Batman's reaction to that was, well, of course, it's the law, so sucks to be you, sit outside and do reconnaissance.
Yeah. And, but, a couple things regarding Robin. Number one, this is the first time we see, like, the computer screen in the Batmobile where he's able to view the inside of the club.
Yeah.
Assuming there's some mysterious cameraman inside there actually feeding him that footage.
Yeah.
But we don't really get any kind of origin for Robin's story in these episodes. He is referred to as Bruce Wayne's ward, but we aren't told why this is the case, how they came to be in that arrangement, and of course, comic readers will know what happened to Robin's parents, but we don't really get that in the show.
Yeah, and we assume that Aunt Harriet is his actual aunt, and not just being a respectful term that you call a woman that is your elder, right? But so we assume that she's his actual aunt. So Batman is drugged because Molly is a plant of the Riddlers, as is apparently the bartender because he spiked the drink. Robin is hit with a dart that knocks him out, that puts him to sleep, and he's kidnapped.
And I'd like to point out when Riddler kidnaps Robin, he tries to steal the Batmobile. But this is our introduction to one of those ingenious bat gadgets that you mentioned. The Batmobile has an anti-fire activator. So it's able to put out the fire that Riddler tries to start in the passenger seat.
And I love the fact that the Batmobile being able to sort of protect and shield itself is something, again, you see in a different form, but later down the line in Batman Returns and this and that, and so but it all stems from probably this iteration, and it just amazes me whether it's the gadgets in the car or the back computer or all the shenanigans he's got in his utility belt. This is really the James Bond, the most James Bond Batman has ever been, I think.
He's got everything you need. Even the Batarang, which he pulls out in the first episode, he pulls it out from his utility belt. The Batarang is way too big to fit in that pocket on the utility belt, but they make it work anyway. Like, he pulls that thing out, and it's like this long, and the pocket on his belt is like this small, and it says Batarang on it. But you don't question it. You just go with it. Yeah,
and it's the interesting thing is just by him having all those gadgets, you would surmise that he created those, right? Like, he made those. So it shows you, it goes back to that early origin panel where Batman is training in not just physically in martial arts, but in science. So the explanation of how he can create these things, right? You go back to the early panels of the comics. He's scientifically inclined, right? So he can create all these different inventions, right? And it's believable. So they're touching on ever so briefly, but they're touching on that aspect of Batman, which is and he does a lot of detecting in this episode. So they're touching on the detective aspect of Batman as well. So they've really got all the aspects of his personality that probably comic readers, if there were at this point in time, had become accustomed to, and it's all here. And so you got to give it credit for that level of detail and accuracy.
Well, yeah, like you point out, he did have to create all these gadgets, and we are also introduced to the trope of them being almost genius level intellects in the way that they solve the Riddler's different riddles. Because that's the whole reason they were called in the first place. Is the police can't crack his codes, but Batman knows that there is a pattern to what the Riddler does, and he even discovers secret hidden riddles that are hidden inside the paper outlining the lawsuit.
Yeah.
So that's very correct that you point out that he is very analytically inclined from what we see in these first two episodes.
Yeah, and so the first episode ends with Robin being captured, Batman being drugged. We get the. I'm assuming we're gonna rate these as 2 episodes, right? Like together, because they're one story.
Yeah.
So that's the break at the end of that episode, and that's where we get the will Robin survive? Will Batman find him in time? Tune in next time, same channel. And then it transitions to the second episode, which was titled Smack in the Middle, right?
Smack in the Middle.
Yeah. And so this episode, we see Riddler and Molly and his henchmen underground, and they're making this. They've got Robin tied up, and they make this Mission Impossible type face mask that looks identical to Robin, and then Molly dresses up in a Robin costume and is essentially planted for Batman to find and take back to the Batcave, where the Riddler has instructed her to take Batman out.
She tries to fire her gun and it doesn't fire, and that Batman says when she wasn't paying attention in the Batmobile, he disabled the gun's firing pin with his laser in the Batmobile.
So he's even got a laser in the Batmobile. So he outsmarts the villain even when they think they have the upper hand.
He says he knew that it wasn't really Robin because the nostrils were I guess they were too perfect from the straws that they created breathing holes for or something.
Yeah. So again, detective work. We don't necessarily see that.
No.
That all that play out, but again, we only have 25 minutes per episode,
right.
So they can't show you all that. And it's not Christopher Nolan involved, so they don't have to show you all that. The things get a little dark though, because Molly tries to escape being wrangled in by Batman, and she climbs the nuclear reactor that's powering the Batmobile. And when Batman goes to save her, she's too afraid and she falls in.
Yeah.
That's pretty dark.
It's pretty dark. Batman comments that he wishes she would have let him save her.
Yeah.
But yeah, Molly apparently seemingly falls to her death. And I should point out Molly is played by Jill St. John, who I believe was kind of a pretty big star at the time, right?
Yes, I agree.
I think it was kind of a big deal that she was a guest starring on these first 2 episodes of this brand new series.
Absolutely.
They killed her character off in the second episode.
And it's funny because what's funny is later on in the episode when Batman goes to rescue Robin, they're trapped by Riddler in this bulletproof glass. And at one point, Batman's banging on the glass in frustration, and I'm like, why even bothering banging on the glass? You blew a hole in the side of the side of the room. You created your own entrance, and I guess they remember that afterwards because the next thing you know, they just go out the side like it's nothing.
Right.
So that kind of made me laugh. That made me laugh. I'm like, why is he getting so upset? There's a giant hole.
Same thought. They just showed a whole scene with him setting up this explosive on the outside of the on the other side of the wall to Riddler's lair, and he blew a hole clean in the side of the thing.
Yeah, there's a giant hole inside the building. What are you worried about? So then we eventually get the showdown, right? Back at the I think it was the art museum in the Moldavian art kind of exhibit, right?
Yep.
And it's the typical, it's your standard Batman and Robin fight the Riddler and all the goons. And that's where, you were talking about how we get the fighting with the punching and the word balloons, and at the end of it all, Riddler's hit with a laughing gas bomb, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Bruce and Dick, when they're back at the manor, Dick is like, well, surely that must have got him because they didn't find a body. And then, Bruce already sets it up that, well, we don't know because they didn't find the body. So he may come back to torment us yet again, right?
Yep. And they set that up by saying that the lawsuit against Batman has been dropped because the Riddler didn't show up in court. So he is missing, presumed dead, but as we know, he is not.
He's far from it because he'll return several times throughout the course of the series to
and played by more than one actor.
Yes, yeah. But we'll cross that particular bridge when we come to it. But is there anything else you want to point out about these 2 episodes before we go ahead and rate this?
Not really. This is our introduction. These 2 episodes are our introduction to this world and to the characters that inhabit this world. Like you mentioned, it drops us right into the middle of it. It's not an origin story, and it hits the ground running. And for the budgets that they had in 1966 and for what they were allowed to do on TV and for the type of family programming they were trying to gear, because everything back then was family programming. You had to be able to sit down and watch it with all the members of your family, or else it wasn't getting past the censors.
There's no HBO, folks.
Yeah.
You ain't getting Game of Thrones.
Right. As a time capsule of when it was produced, I think it's fantastic. And here we are 57 years later, and I still enjoy watching it.
Oh, yeah. I had a blast.
Today as much as I did 35 years ago when I was a kid.
I definitely can't wait to keep going through the series on the podcast. But so when we give our ratings, keep in mind we're rating it under the prism of what Chris just talked about, all of those things involved. But so, what would you a letter grade? What would you rate these first 2 episodes, this premiere, if you will?
Oh, this is a solid A. We get Batman's analytical and deductive skills. We get a vibrant and on top of his game Frank Gorshin as our first villain on the show. And we get great performances, like you pointed out, by Alan Napier. And all around, this is solid, man. It's an A for me.
Yeah, it's absolutely an A, just because it gives you everything you'd want if you tried to conceive a family-friendly Batman show, right? And certain things you want in the premiere episode, they literally give you a sampling of everything.
You get Wayne Manor, the Batcave, the Batmobile, all classic and iconic.
You get great, some cool fight scenes. The first entrance of Batman and Robin, where they break through the window.
Yeah.
But gently resting the screen on a bat hook that's in his belt, because we gotta watch the onlookers below. We can't hurt anybody, so conveniently has a bat hook hanging in his utility belt. But it's all there, and I absolutely loved it. And watching it as a now 40-year-old man, I think I was just as engrossed rewatching it as I was when I was 4, which was the first time I probably saw it. So, it's an A for me as well. So, thoroughly enjoyable, and like I said, I can't wait to go through the rest of the series throughout the course of on these podcasts. But also, we have the good fortune of being able to dive into the comic books based on the series that came out years later, and the animated movies the 2 animated movies that came long after the series was done as well. So we've got a lot to cover when it comes to Batman 66, and I'm looking forward to doing that. But in the meantime, That brings the show to a close. And if you want to get in touch with Chris or I to talk about Batman 66 or any other version of Batman you so choose to discuss with us, you can on social media. Chris, where do they track you down?
I'm on Twitter at Chris N. Harrelson, or you can search for Commodore Schmidlap. That's my, or X as we call it now instead of Twitter. Commodore Schmidlap is my username on there. And yeah, I'm on Facebook too. Adam will post about this in the group. So
yeah,
I'm there too.
Yeah. And if you want to follow me, it's at Adam_LeafsFan on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it's called nowadays. Might change next week. We also have the page for the podcast network on there, which is at MMNPDC. We have a Facebook group. It's listed in the description below. Click the link. I will add you, and we can continue the conversation there. But remember, Batman 66 is forever. From the first time Alfred answers the special red phone to the last. So long, everybody.
Bye.